Good evening, friends. Tonight we'll drift into a slow and gentle journey through ancient Greek myths and the quiet wisdom they hold. Stories of inventors and dreamers, of stone carved into beauty, and wings that dared to touch the sky. Dim your lights, settle under your blanket, let the noise of the day fade away, and if this calm journey helps you relax, feel free to tap like and subscribe, only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. Tell me what time it is in your city right now. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world, whether you're winding down after a long day or finding a moment of peace in the quiet hours. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our journey with the legend of a man who dared to give humans wings. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to look up at birds and feel jealous? Not just curious, but actually envious of their freedom to soar above the world's problems and boundaries? That's exactly how Daedalus felt as he stood at the window of his prison tower on the island of Crete, watching seagulls dance effortlessly through the morning air. But let's step back for a moment, because Daedalus wasn't always a prisoner. In fact, he was once the most celebrated inventor and architect in all of ancient Greece. His name was whispered in the same breath as the gods themselves, and kings from distant lands would send messengers begging for his services. You see, Daedalus had a gift that seemed almost magical. While other craftsmen could carve stone into recognizable shapes, Daedalus could make marble figures that looked so real, people swore they were about to start breathing. While other builders constructed sturdy but simple structures, Daedalus created palaces with rooms that seemed to flow like water and corridors that curved like music made solid. But perhaps his greatest talent was solving problems that everyone else considered impossible. Need to move a massive stone block up a steep hill? Daedalus would design a system of pulleys and counterweights that made the work seem effortless. Want to bring fresh water to the top floor of a tall building? He'd create an ingenious pump system that used the weight of falling water to push more water upward. The people of Athens loved him for these innovations. Farmers used his improved ploughs to grow better crops. Merchants relied on his precision scales for fair trading. Even ordinary families benefited from his designs for more efficient cooking stoves and better oil lamps that burned brighter with less fuel. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. King Minos of Crete heard about this brilliant inventor and decided he absolutely had to have Daedalus working for him. Not just for a project or two, but permanently. You see, Minos was the kind of ruler who collected talented people, the way some people collect beautiful pottery or rare gems. So he sent envoys to Athens with an offer that seemed too good to refuse. Come to Crete, they said. Build wonders for our king. Live in luxury, have unlimited resources, create things that will amaze the world. What inventor could resist such an opportunity? Daedalus, along with his young son Icarus, sailed to Crete expecting to find paradise. And at first, it seemed like he had. The palace of Knossos was magnificent beyond imagination, with walls painted in colours that seemed to glow with inner light, and gardens that bloomed year-round thanks to clever irrigation systems. King Minos welcomed them warmly, and immediately put Daedalus to work on projects that stretched his abilities in exciting new directions. He designed mechanical servants that could carry messages through the palace corridors. He created a throne room with acoustics so perfect that the king's whisper could be clearly heard in the farthest corner. He even built an early version of what we might recognise today as air conditioning, using underground chambers and water flow to keep the palace cool during Crete's hot summers. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the paradise began to feel more like a cage. When Daedalus mentioned that he might like to visit Athens to see old friends, Minos would find urgent new projects that required immediate attention. When other kings sent requests for Daedalus's services, Minos would politely decline on his behalf, explaining that the great inventor was far too busy with important work in Crete. The truth became clear when Daedalus finally tried to leave. The ship he had booked passage on was mysteriously delayed, then delayed again. When he attempted to arrange different transportation, he discovered that every ship captain on the island had received orders not to carry him as a passenger. King Minos, you see, had decided that Daedalus was too valuable to lose. The inventor's knowledge and skills gave Crete enormous advantages over neighbouring kingdoms. His mechanical innovations made the island's defences nearly impregnable. His architectural designs created spaces so beautiful that visiting dignitaries went home, convinced that Minos must indeed be favoured by the gods. But the final straw came when Minos commissioned his most ambitious project yet, a labyrinth to contain the Minotaur, a creature born from divine punishment and royal shame. Half human and half bull, the Minotaur was too dangerous to roam free but too sacred to kill. It needed a prison that was also a palace, a maze so complex that even its builder would struggle to navigate it. Daedalus created this labyrinth with a heavy heart, knowing that he was condemning a thinking creature to eternal confusion and isolation. The maze was a masterwork of psychological engineering, designed not just to prevent escape but to defeat hope itself. Every corridor looked familiar but led somewhere unexpected. Every turn seemed to promise progress but delivered only deeper bewilderment. When the labyrinth was complete, Minos was so pleased that he made his position crystal clear. Daedalus would never be allowed to leave Crete. His knowledge was too dangerous to risk in the hands of enemies, too valuable to lose to competitors. The great inventor and his son were now permanent residents of their luxurious prison. It was then, standing at his tower window and watching those effortlessly soaring birds, that Daedalus began to think seriously about flight. Not as a fantasy or a philosophical exercise, but as an engineering problem with a practical solution. He studied the gulls for hours each day, observing how they positioned their wings to catch updrafts, how they adjusted their feather angles to change direction, how they managed to stay aloft with what seemed like minimal effort. He examined feathers that blew into his workshop, testing their flexibility and strength, understanding how their structure created lift. But most importantly, he began to see that flight wasn't just about copying birds. It was about understanding the principles that made flight possible, and then adapting those principles to human needs and capabilities. Working in secret, using materials he could gather without arousing suspicion, Daedalus began constructing 2 sets of wings. The frame was made from wood, carved thin and light but strong enough to bear human weight. The feathers were arranged in careful patterns that mimicked birdwing structure, each one positioned to channel air in precisely the right direction. But the real innovation was in how he attached everything together. Instead of rigid connections that would break under stress, he used wax, warmed and shaped to create flexible joints that could bend and move like living tissue. The wax would hold the feathers securely in place while allowing the wing to respond naturally to air currents. As he worked, often by candlelight after the palace had gone to sleep, Daedalus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: pure creative joy. Not the satisfaction of solving someone else's problem or fulfilling someone else's vision, but the deep happiness that comes from creating something entirely new, something that has never existed before. Young Icarus watched his father work with fascination and growing excitement. The boy had inherited Daedalus's mechanical aptitude and understood immediately that they weren't just building a clever device, they were crafting their freedom. But as the wings neared completion, Daedalus found himself thinking more and more about the risks they were taking. Flight had never been attempted by humans before. One miscalculation, one structural failure, one moment of poor judgment, and they would plummet to their deaths on the rocks below the palace. Yet the alternative was to spend the rest of their lives as Minos's prized possessions, creating wonders for a king who valued their talents more than their humanity. When he thought about it that way, the choice became clear. The night before their planned escape, Daedalus gave Icarus careful instructions about how the wings worked and how to use them safely. "Stay close to me," he warned. "Don't fly too low, or the sea spray will dampen the feathers and make them heavy. But don't fly too high either, because the sun's heat will soften the wax and the wings will fall apart." Icarus nodded solemnly, understanding the seriousness of what they were about to attempt. But there was also excitement in his young eyes. The thrill of adventure, the prospect of experiencing something no human had ever felt before. As dawn broke over the Mediterranean, father and son strapped on their wings and climbed to the highest tower of the palace. The wind was steady but not too strong, perfect for their first and probably only flight. Below them, the sea stretched endlessly toward the horizon, toward freedom, toward a future they could choose for themselves. And then, with a deep breath and a prayer to whatever gods might favour desperate inventors, Daedalus stepped off the tower and into the unknown sky. Behind him, Icarus followed, and together they discovered what it truly means to fly. But that's a story for another moment, isn't it? As you settle deeper into your pillow tonight, think about this. What would you be willing to risk for the chance to soar above the boundaries that hold you down? You wake before dawn in ancient Athens, and the world feels different when you're 12 years old and your hands already know secrets that grown men struggle to learn. The cool morning air drifts through the window of your small room above your father's workshop, carrying with it the familiar scent of marble dust and bronze shavings. Your name is Daedalus, though you don't yet know that this name will echo through centuries. Right now, you're just a boy whose fingers seem to understand stone in ways that puzzle even your father. When you touch a rough piece of marble, you can feel the smooth figure hiding inside, waiting patiently to be freed. The workshop below creaks with the weight of half-finished statues. Your father, Mettion, is already awake. You can hear him moving carefully around his tools, the soft scrape of chisel against stone creating a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. But here's what's curious. Your father's work is good, solid, respectable, the kind of statues that wealthy Athenians order for their gardens and courtyards. Yet when you pick up the same tools, something different happens. You slip downstairs, your bare feet silent on the worn wooden steps. The workshop smells like centuries of creativity, that particular mix of stone dust, metal, and something else, something harder to name. Maybe it's the scent of dreams taking shape. Your father glances up from his work, a small smile creasing his weathered face. Early again, Daedalus. The stone calls to you, doesn't it? And it does, but not in the way it calls to him. When your father works, he follows the old patterns, the traditional forms. He carves gods and heroes with the same poses everyone expects. Zeus with his thunderbolt raised, Athena with her spear and shield, warriors frozen in familiar stances. Beautiful work, but predictable. When you work, something else happens entirely. You walk to your corner of the workshop where a piece of white marble waits. It's not particularly special, just a block your father was going to use for practice pieces, but as you run your hands over its surface, you feel something stirring inside the stone. Not a god or a hero, but something much more interesting. A person. An ordinary person, but caught in a moment of genuine life. You pick up your chisel, smaller than your father's, worn smooth by your grip, and begin to work. But here's where the real mystery starts. Other sculptors hack and chip, fighting the stone, forcing it to bend to their will. You do something different. You listen. The marble seems to whisper where it wants to be cut. Your chisel finds the natural fault lines, the places where the stone is ready to give way. Instead of imposing your will on the material, you partner with it. The marble dust falls away in perfect curls, revealing not just shape, but something that looks almost alive. Wait, what exactly makes your work so different? Your father stops his own carving to watch you work. He's done. This many times before, but there's always that same expression of puzzled wonder on his face. Because what you're creating isn't just a statue. It's a moment frozen in time, but a moment that feels like it could resume at any second. The figure emerging from your marble is a young woman, but she's not posed like a goddess or a princess. She's reaching down to pick up something. Maybe a flower, maybe a fallen scroll. Her face is turned slightly, as if she heard someone call her name. Her hair falls naturally over one shoulder, not arranged in formal curls but caught in the middle of movement. And here's the thing that makes even experienced craftsmen stop and stare. She looks like she's breathing. How do you make stone look alive? It starts with understanding that marble isn't just rock. It's compressed sea creatures and ancient coral, transformed by pressure and time into something new. When you work with it, you're not fighting against its nature. You're revealing what it was always meant to become. But there's more to it than technique. There's something in the way you see the world that's different from other artists. While they're trying to capture ideal beauty or divine perfection, you're fascinated by the smaller, real moments that make people human. Your father sets down his tools and walks over to examine your work. "How do you do it, son?" he asks quietly. "How do you make stone look like it has a heartbeat?" You pause, considering the question. The truth is, you're not entirely sure yourself. When you work, it feels less like carving, and more like having a conversation. The stone tells you where it wants to change, and you listen. Sometimes you even find yourself apologizing to the marble when you have to make a cut that feels particularly difficult. "I think about what she was doing just before this moment," you say, gesturing to your emerging sculpture. "And what she'll do right after. She's not just standing there, she's in the middle of living her life." Your father nods slowly, but you can see he doesn't quite understand. Not yet. That understanding will come later, when your name spreads beyond Athens, when kings summon you to create wonders that no one has imagined before. The morning light grows stronger, streaming through the workshop windows and illuminating the marble dust that dances in the air like tiny stars. You return to your work, your chisel moving in small, precise movements. Each chip of stone that falls away reveals a little more life, a little more humanity. Other boys your age are learning to read and write, studying mathematics and philosophy. You're learning something different. How to find the soul hiding inside solid stone. How to free it without breaking it. How to make the impossible look effortless. But even as you work, you find yourself wondering about other things. What would happen if you applied these same principles to other materials? Could wood be coaxed into new forms? Could metal be persuaded to bend in impossible ways? Could you create not just beautiful objects, but useful ones? Things that could move and work and help people in their daily lives? Your mind wanders as your hands continue their careful work. You imagine pulleys that could lift enormous weights with minimal effort, gears that could transfer motion from one place to another, maybe even machines that could fly, like the birds that soar effortlessly over Athens each morning. But that's all far in the future. Right now, you're just a boy in a dusty workshop, learning that the line between art and magic is much thinner than most people realize. Learning that creation isn't about force, it's about patience, observation, and a kind of gentle persistence that can convince even stone to become something extraordinary. The sun climbs higher, and soon your father's other apprentices will arrive. They're older than you, more experienced in traditional techniques, but they'll gather around your workstation anyway, watching with the same puzzled fascination as everyone else who sees what you can do. Some of them whisper that there's something unnatural about your skill, something that doesn't come from normal learning. They're not entirely wrong. But what they don't understand is that your gift isn't supernatural. It's super-observational. You see details that others miss, patterns that others overlook, possibilities that others never consider. And as you put the finishing touches on your marble woman, smoothing the curve of her cheek, defining the delicate bones in her reaching hand, you can't help but wonder what other impossible things might be possible if only someone took the time to really listen to the materials, to understand their nature instead of fighting against it. The workshop grows busy around you, but you barely notice. You're lost in the quiet conversation between your hands and the stone, learning lessons that will someday reshape the world. Though you don't know it yet, you're developing the skills that will build labyrinths and craft wings that will serve kings and challenge gods. But for now, you're content to be exactly where you are. A boy who has discovered that stone, like everything else in the world, has its own secret language. And somehow, miraculously, you're fluent in that language. The question that lingers in the marble-scented air is this: what other languages will you learn to speak? The language of stone was just the beginning, wasn't it? As the seasons turn and you grow from that wondering boy into a young man, your hands begin to crave more than marble and chisel. They hunger for bronze and iron, for wood and rope, for the intricate dance of moving parts that can multiply human strength and extend human reach. You find yourself in the workshop of Euchaer, the greatest engineer in Athens, though few people know his name. While sculptors and painters receive praise in the agora, engineers work in quiet corners, solving problems that most people never think about. How do you lift a stone too heavy for 10 men? How do you move water uphill? How do you make a wheel turn another wheel with precise control? The morning light filters through Euchaer's workshop, illuminating contraptions that would seem like magic to most Athenians. Pulleys arranged in intricate combinations, gear wheels carved from hardwood and fitted with bronze teeth, levers that can move enormous weights with the touch of a finger. But you see beyond the magic to the principles underneath. Euchaer is a patient teacher, but he's also constantly surprised by how quickly you grasp concepts that took him years to understand. "Look at this, Daedalus," he says, gesturing to a complex arrangement of pulleys. 6 ropes, 3 wheels. How much weight could one man lift with this system? You study the arrangement, tracing the path of the rope with your eyes. But you don't need to calculate. You can almost feel the mechanical advantage, the way force multiplies and redirects through the system. 6 times his own strength, you answer. But the rope would have to move 6 times as far. Euchaer nods approvingly. Exactly. Force and distance. They balance like weights on a scale. Gain one, sacrifice the other. But here's what's interesting. He pauses, watching your face carefully. Most people see that as a limitation. What do you see? This is the kind of question that makes your mind come alive. You walk around the pulley system, examining it from different angles, running your hands along the ropes and wheels. The answer comes not from calculation, but from imagination. I see choice, you say.